Hey everyone, this is Mike and welcome back to Rating 101. We took a little break because of patch 5.25 because I wanted to make some videos on the new content that came out during that, but today we're back with Rating 101 and with a topic that I think a lot of people have been waiting for: FFlogs, ACT and self-improvement. Self-improvement part is very important because that's mainly what I'm going to be talking about today, and ACT and FFlogs are some beautiful tools in order to do that. So in the first part of the video I'm just going to be talking about what those tools are, why I like to use them, and why I think other people should change their view on these tools as well a little bit, because ACTs especially has a very bad image with some people because they think it is just used to shit talk other people because they're playing bad and you want to just show how good you are compared to other people. But for me personally, and for a lot of people that I have played with, we use ACT together with FFlogs and even another third tool as well called FFXIV analysis to basically improve our own gameplay and then make it so that we become a better player, meaning that we can clear these fights in a more efficient manner, like for example going for week 1 clears, or of course going into ultimate and clearing those fights as well, because if you want to do ultimate content you do need to be a relatively good player as well. So in today's video I'm going to be talking about all of that stuff in the first half. In the second half I'm also going to show some stuff that you can do with ACT and that FFXIV analysis thing. Earlier this morning, like about half an hour ago when I'm recording this, a viewer of mine came to me and said, "Hey look Ilya, I'm trying to get better on Samurai, can you help me out?" And I was like, sure, hit a dummy, upload the log on FFlogs, I'll have a look. And then we basically talked a little bit, showed him some of his mistakes and that kind of stuff, and without ACT, without FFlogs, I would not have been able to point that stuff out. So first of all, what is ACT, what is FFlogs, what is FFXIV analysis, what are all these things and where can you get them? So first of all, there is one major flaw to this system, so to speak, and that is that it only works on PC. So if you're a PS4 player, there currently is not a real tool for you to parse yourself, because these things, or well, ACT is actually a parser, meaning that it basically reads all of the data that is given from the game to you, like client side, like numbers and that kind of stuff, and then it basically puts that into something that we can read as a player. For the most part, people will be using ACT as some kind of a DPS tracker where you can just see how much damage you are doing, how much damage the rest of your party is doing, and some people think, oh, you're looking at how much damage everyone is doing, you're just trying to be better than the rest, and then maybe like shit talking some people that aren't playing that well. On the other hand, of course, we can use all this information and put it into a website like FFlogs, where it will basically read a whole lot more than just the damage that you are doing. For example, how many costs per minute do you have, how much damage was taken, what damage was taken. For example, remember a few videos ago where I talked about mitigation and that kind of stuff, where it is important to know what type of damage that you're taking? Well, in ACT and in FFlogs, you are able to look at the damage that you are taking, and then you can see what exactly, like what type of damage that is, so you can act accordingly with your mitigation and that kind of stuff. So there's basically a whole lot of information in there. I am not gonna go super in-depth on all of the FFlog stuff, because then we'll still be here tomorrow, because there is so much stuff that you can learn and that the program or the website will show you. So it's going to be a more streamlined video, I guess you could say, when it comes down to like going into FFlogs, the stuff that you can see there. But it's basically something that everybody should know so that they can compare themselves to others, because that is a very important thing about FFlogs. It is being able to put yourself on a list, so to speak, so that you can compare yourself to other players, so that you can see what are these better players doing, what am I doing wrong, what should I do different when it comes down to rotational stuff, etc. So there's a lot of stuff that you can learn there. Now, when it comes down to FFXIV analysis, this is a little website where you can input logs that you uploaded on FFlogs, and then you can basically see what you were doing wrong. Like for example, missed combos, overwritten actions. For example, back to this Samurai example, which I'll be showing off as well. He was overwriting sends. Like sends are those symbols that you get whenever you finish a combo. This is something that you can't see on a log, but for example, or at least not as easily seen on a log, but in FFXIV analysis it says, oh, you missed a midare here, or you're overwriting a send there, you missed an off GCD there, something like that, and then it basically will tell you your mistakes and you can act accordingly. The reason why I put ACT as such an important raid tool is because without it, I personally probably wouldn't have cleared Alexander Ultimate when I did, and we also probably wouldn't have had a week 1 clear of Shiva Savage either. The reason being is because, again, it shows you your numbers. Now, when it comes down to Alexander specifically, it was me that was the problem. Halfway through Prog, I switched, or well, not halfway, at the start of Prog, I started as Gunbreaker, I was geared for Gunbreaker, I was melded for Gunbreaker. Basically, everything was made so that my Gunbreaker would do the most damage. Now, after I think it was like 1 or 2 lockouts, I ended up switching to Warrior because that was not only easier for me to play, like easier on my hands, but it was also easier for my team because it wasn't as stressful for my healer. So that's why I stuck to Warrior when it came down for the rest of Prog. Eventually, I cleared on Gunbreaker as well, but I progged on Warrior. Now, when we first started hitting Enrage, we of course uploaded the logs to FFlogs and looked at our damage and that kind of stuff. And I noticed that my damage was really bad. And I'm like, well, I need to change something. I need to compare this to someone else. So what did I do? I went on FFlogs. I looked at the strongest warrior parse for Alexander Ultimate, compared myself against that. What was he doing? What was I doing? Where are my mistakes? And then I noticed that I wasn't making mistakes. And I'm like, wait, that shouldn't be possible, right? I'm doing almost the exact same thing as this other person, and I'm doing way less damage than he is. And then it came to me that my gear is all tuned for Gunbreaker, not Warrior, and Warrior is a special tank in the sense that they want different stats than, for example, Gunbreaker or Paladin, because they are more focused on direct hit stuff. Warrior was all about direct hit, not direct hit, but crit and that stuff. So I switched around my gear, I switched around my melts and that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden my Warrior's DPS went up by 700 DPS. So just because of those numbers and the fact that I could see that we were doing the same thing, but his actions were hitting harder, made me think, alright, I have a Gunbreaker gear set, not a Warrior gear set, so remelding, getting new gear made it so that all of a sudden my Warrior did more damage just because of that. Now, that's not the only thing, of course, like sometimes it is because of play, and that brings me to the other example in Shiva Savage. When we were going for our week 1 clear, we didn't have FFlogs, or at least ACT up for the most part of it, but towards the weekend ACT was working again because it usually needs to be updated whenever there's a new patch. But once we had access to our numbers, we could see that one person in particular in our party was underperforming quite a bit, and we weren't sure how that was. So we looked at the logs, we saw what he was doing wrong, and then basically the person that knew a lot about that job that the person that was not playing so well was playing, they basically took an hour, like we just took a 2-hour break, they sat together for an hour, they looked over the POVs, because luckily enough, that player was also recording all of their runs and that kind of stuff, so they had some footage to go over. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, this is where you're going wrong, this is what you should change. And all of a sudden that player did 1,000, 1,500 3 TPS more, and we were able to clear the fight week 1 even with someone dying, whereas before, even without someone dying with a perfect run, no damage downs, that kind of stuff, we still hit Enrage and that kind of stuff. So that's basically why ACT and FFlogs is very important when it comes down to raiding, but more specifically when it comes down to getting better. A lot of people need to get out of this mindset that ACT exists for people to feel better about themselves compared to other players and be like, well, I am much better than you are, you're shit, get good or whatever. It's for most people that take raiding a little bit more serious, that want to go for week 1 clears, want to do ultimate and that kind of stuff, or if you just want to get better, it is an extremely good tool for self-improvement. And I just want to make that clear, because a lot of people that use ACT, yes, there will be those toxic elitist players that just use it to shit talk on others, but most people out there will be using ACT and FFlogs to make sure that they get better, that they improve, to see where their mistakes are, to learn from those mistakes. And now I'm basically going to show you some stuff that you can use in order to do that for yourself as well. As I said with the example from before, the viewer that came to me, I was like, do you have ACT? Make an account on FFlogs, I'm going to show you some stuff, and now he can basically look at those things himself and see if he gets to improve as well, and hopefully he'll get to that point as well. So let's switch over to my monitor and then look at what we can kind of do with FFlogs and then also with XIV analysis, how that one works. So now I switched over to my monitor. This is kind of what FFlogs look like. I'm just going to minimize that advertisement. But there's basically a lot of stuff that you can see. So this is all the personal stuff that I have. These are the guilds that I am in, which basically like 2 out of these I'm not raiding with anymore, so that doesn't really matter too much. can see your own reports that you've uploaded. For example, I did Ultimate yesterday evening on Scholar, which was quite interesting, but then I can basically click on this, and then all of a sudden I can see all of the encounters and that kind of stuff, but I'll go over that in just a second. There's some other stuff that you can see, like for example, the fastest groups, the best in execution, who had the most TPS and that kind of stuff, but for the most part, the like homepage, so to speak. I don't really use all that much. Now, if you want to use FFlogs, of course, you will need ACT, that's the first thing that you need, and you also need to use like the client, so you can just click here to install the client, and then you can use the FFlogs uploader, as it's called, to upload your logs to FFlogs. So for example, if I click on this ultimate example again, you can basically go in here, you click on a random log, and you can get a summary of all of the kind of stuff. For example, damage done by source, healing done by source, damage taken by ability, names when it comes down to like people dying and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, you're just going to be using these things on the top here, like for example, damage done. You can see what everybody is doing. Damage taken. This one is usually not super important, but for example, if you're trying to figure out, like in a few videos ago where I was talking about mitigation, you can see what types of damages people were taking. So for example, if I click on Mr. Sylvia, you can also of course filter it by who is attacking you and that kind of stuff, or of course go through the different phases like Garuda. Let's say Garuda, just like that. And we can see that her normal attacks are physical because it's orange-ish, super cyclone, magical damage, downburst, physical damage, and then this is all magical damage again as well. For example, I think I used Ifrit as an example for darkness damage. You could see that as well. This is not magical or physical, this is darkness damage. So you can see that as well, and then of course the rest is all magical and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can see here basically. So when healing as well, for example, if I'm comparing with my co-healer, for example, I thought that my co-healer was completely carrying the healing. Apparently I'm doing a little bit more than him in general. So you can kind of balance this out as well. Like for example, if you're raiding an aesthetic environment and you're like, well, if we're both going to be healing, we kind of want to make it so that we're both doing the same amount of healing to make it more fair for the other person and that kind of stuff. So you can come take a look at the logs and see who is doing what, all of that kind of stuff. You can also take a look at deaths. Oh, wait, for example, nobody died in Ifrit. But for example, over here you can see that our Dragoon died to Landslide on Titan, and then everybody died to Ultima because our tanks forgot to use LB3. But yeah, basically there's a bunch of stuff that you can see in here, which is really cool that you can do. Now, what I usually like to look at the most when it comes down to improving myself is the costs. Now, when it comes down to improving in this game, a lot of people need to learn to press more buttons. I know it sounds really stupid, but pressing more buttons is one of the most important things that you can do. When you ask a really good player, what do you do different than I do, the first thing that most people will go look at is this little graph right here, CPM, costs per minute, meaning how many buttons did you press in a minute. And of course, this will vary from job to job that you're playing. Like for example, a ninja is much more active than something like a white mage, but you can at least see and compare yourself against other players. For example, I'm going to put a picture on screen real quick where I compared my samurai 3-minute parse against the other samurai 3-minute parse. Like for example, I just wanted to see what he was doing different, and then we could see that I was pressing a lot more buttons, not just when it came down to GCDs, but also missed off GCD usages and that kind of stuff. You can compare yourself against somebody else. For example, if it was down to me, say for example I go on like my Shiva or something with Black Mage, and maybe I'm doing some things wrong here or there, then I can just take one of the better Black Mage logs for Shiva and I compare my cost against his or hers, and then I can see what they are doing different and that kind of stuff. I can also go into the timeline, which is really cool. Like for example, if we're back on this example, I can just click on myself and then you can see exactly all of the attacks that you used, and then if you click on timeline right here, you can also exactly see what was used in what order. So you can see my opener, you can see where I use my heals and that kind of stuff. Like for example, here I use my Whispering Dawn, this is my chain. For example, like you want to know some other stuff, like my padding on the ads and that kind of stuff. I use a sucker here. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can see when it comes down to like mitigation and that kind of stuff as well. When it comes down to deaths, now we did only have our Dragoon die here, which was also a dev that we couldn't help. Wait, let me go back to tables. So when I look at these kind of things, you can also see how someone died. So for example, this started over here, so he gets hit by heals over time, landslides, gets a regeneration buff, and then just dies to the landslide because it hit him for too much. But for example, say someone dies to something else, maybe let me see if I can find another log where people just die to stuff. Oh no, that's the tank buster. Wait, let me find something good. Mountain buster. So for example, over here, this one is going to be much better. So you can see what healing he receives from me and my co-healer. You can see what attacks he receives. So for example, this is just an auto attack. Rock Buster is the first hit of the Tank Buster. Then he got an X-Cock from me, an attack, some other heals, an attack, and then the Mountain Buster itself, which then completely insta-gipped him. And you can also see when he last used stuff. So for this one, for example, he only used Sheltron. Sheltron is not enough to survive through this attack, of course, and he also got a Heart of Stone from our Gunbreaker. So you can see that he basically didn't have much mitigation. Probably was because somebody else was dead or something like that, because normally you will have more mitigation for this available. But you can basically see what happened, why he died or something like that, which can be really useful for figuring some certain stuff out. Now, when it comes down to improvement from all of this kind of stuff, like you won't always have somebody else to compare yourself against, like for example in that samurai example that I said, because kill times will be different, or strats will be different, so you'll be doing different stuff. Now, when it comes down to just learning your job or something like that, as I said, I told him to go hit a striking dummy, and because of that, I basically had a very good example. Like he does 3 minutes, I do 3 minutes, and we can compare that. Now, if you do not have someone to compare yourself against, like for example, you're just learning a job on a striking dummy, what you can do is you can still upload that log, which is what I did over here. So if I go to my own personal reports real quick, bam, unknown zone, striking dummy, 3 minutes. And then I can see my damage done. Of course, now my samurai is not geared, it's still running around with some crafted gear from the previous raid tier. So my damage, of course, is not good. But you can basically see what I did. I can also click on myself to see what damage did the most. You can also compare your average damage from each hit. This is, by the way, how I figured out that my warrior gear was wrong, because the best warriors, Felcleaves, were hitting for like an average of 2,000 to 3,000 damage more than mine. And I'm like, well, all of his attacks are basically hitting harder than mine. Most of them are under inner release or like under inner chaos, which is like the guaranteed direct hit critical ones. I'm like, oh, it has something to do with my gear. So that's kind of how I found that out. But yeah, you can basically see a lot of stuff here. But then of course I was able to go to costs, see what I was doing, and then compare it against him. Now, one of the cool things that you can do is you can go to a website called FFXIV Analysis, which is this one over here. Now, on this one, you can basically input one of your logs. So for example, if I open up a new one and say I put in my samurai log right here, just paste it in, and then it'll analyze that kind of stuff. Now you can see, like normally if it's a normal log, wait, let me just put a normal log in here as well, so that you can basically see everything. So let me just take some random Ramu one, paste it in there, and then you can see all of the people that it's available for. Now, of course, this website is not 100% perfect. It also doesn't work for everything, as you can see, outdated Astrologian and Paladin, so they're still working on this kind of stuff. But for the most part, you can see for what patches it's updated and that kind of stuff. So say, for example, I want to look at my own stuff, what I was doing. I click on it, then it will analyze the log for me, and then it'll basically tell me some stuff that I was doing wrong. So for example, here, I didn't stand in my ley lines for the full duration of the ley lines. Now, of course, this might be because of certain mechanics that I had to move out or something like that, but it'll still point out those kind of things. For example, here with my Thunder 3 dot, I can also click on this to see where I used something wrong or something like that. Now, if I say used Thunder or missed Thundercloud procs, like for example, let them run out, this would also say, oh, you let Thundercloud procs run out. For example, it also says I had 95% uptime of my dot, so it means that I dropped it here or there. Apparently, I also weaved wrong at some point, which it'll probably tell me down here as well, and that kind of stuff. So you can basically see a lot of things. For example, rotation outliers, it'll show me where I did some weird stuff. Like for example, I missed a despair before I went into ice phase here. For example, here I could have gotten in an extra fire 4, something like that. So there's a lot of stuff that you can basically see in these kind of things, which is pretty cool. So for example, here with my ley lines uptime as well, like in the first two ley lines, I don't spend the full duration in them, where I normally should have been able to do that. And you can also see the full timeline of all of the actions that you were using and that kind of stuff, which can be pretty useful. Now, of course, because I played relatively well, there isn't much that you can see here. So I'm going to go back to that samurai example where we know that he was missing some stuff, and then you can see a bunch of other things. So for example, here with meditation, he missed a use of Shoha because there were still meditation stacks available. Now you do need 3 meditation stacks to use a Shoha, but you'll see why that is over here with the off GCD usage. He missed a usage of Meiko and Kaeshi, meaning that you're basically losing 2 meditation stacks, meaning that because he didn't use this, he only had 2 out of 3 possible Shohas. And you can also see that he missed a Sene usage. So it basically says, oh, you're missing some off GCDs, you should be using these on cooldown. For example, here, always be casting. He didn't have the full GCD uptime, meaning that he was basically thinking about this rotation too much. One of the best things that you can do if you're learning is always be casting. Just use your buttons even if you're pressing the wrong buttons. It's more important to make small rotational mistakes, but keeping your GCD rolling rather than completely stopping, thinking of what you need to do, and then press the correct button, because that usually ends up being a much more bigger DPS loss. So for example, always be casting. Your GCD uptime needs to be higher. And then here, suggestions as well. For example, using a wrong GCD during Meiko Shisui. For example, 3 wasted Sen, meaning that he did a complete combo whilst he already had that Sen active. So he basically is overwriting them, meaning that he's using less AI Jutsus, meaning, again, less Shohas and that kind of stuff. When it comes down to like third eye, don't worry about this for Samurai, because of course on a dummy you can't use this. And then for example over here as well, avoid breaking combos, 2 combos or 2 misused combo actions twice. So it's pretty cool that you can kind of see if you used a wrong combo or something like that. And then it also usually estimates your GCD, but that doesn't usually matter too much. And then again, you can kind of see your whole thing over here. For example, he used an on-comboed Yukikaze at 1 minute and 8, and then at 1:11 he used Hakase, Shifu Hakase again, instead of using a Kasha here at the end, so it was a broken combo. So basically a lot of cool stuff that you can see over here to analyze your play, to see what you were doing wrong, to see where you can improve and that kind of stuff. And that kind of brings me to the closing note of this video. ACT, FFlogs, and then this little program right here, they are all tools to help you improve at the game. Now, I know that there's a lot of people that just like to play casually, they don't care whether or not they're playing good or not. But I also know that there is a lot of people out there that just want to improve, want to get better at the game because they get enjoyment out of that. For example, for me personally as well, if I play a game, I want to be good at the game, and stuff like this all helps me see how good am I doing, what am I doing wrong, where can I improve. And that is the most important thing to take away from this. If you're going to be using ACT in a static environment or that kind of stuff, don't use it to belittle your static or your raid members and that kind of stuff. Use it to help them improve. See who is maybe not paying or who is not playing that well, upload it to FFlogs, see what they're doing wrong, put it into XIV analysis to maybe figure out some other stuff, like for example those minor things, like for example using comboed actions, or for example missing off global cooldowns here or there, which can then lead to a DPS loss and that kind of stuff. Help them improve, because that is the main reason why these tools exist. Yes, of course you can still rank yourself against other players, like for example if I go back to this log right here, I can just click on rankings and see how everybody ranks up against other players. For example, I had a good luck, some rank 324 for all of the black mages on E5 Savage, which is pretty cool. But this stuff all isn't super important to me. What I'm mainly going to be looking at is the analytical stuff. For example, how much damage did I do, what were my costs, could I have done something different here or there. Like for example, when I put it into the XIV analysis, I could see that I should have some more uptime on my ley lines and that kind of stuff. Or like incorrect usages during my combos, or like my GCD rotation, because Black Mage doesn't have combos. But those are basically all kind of things that you can see. These are all tools that you can use to improve yourself and become a better player in the end. So That's all I wanted to talk about in today's video. If you have any more questions about ACT or in how to install it and that kind of stuff, feel free to leave a comment down below or hit me up on Discord. Discord is usually a better like medium if you want to have a little conversation about this kind of stuff, basically. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.